11 people find themselves in an unknown place, unable to recall how they got there. All they seemed to have in common was they were from a place called Townia. Among them was a mercenary named Carl, a carpenter named Lyle, a shop owner named Lalcia, a girl named Jenna from a remote forest, and a farmer called Islat Han. The group begins to speculate on how they arrived to their current location, before suddenly being interrupted by a fairy introducing herself as Isel, who claimed to be the manager of the place. Carl the mercenary is quick to interject and ask whether she was the one that brought them to their current location. Isel refuses to answer and Carl quickly unsheathes his sword, threatening her. Isel warns him to stop acting stupid or else he'll die. Irritated by this, Carl decides to attack. Before he could even move, his head was detached from his body in the blink of an eye, causing the other people to scream and panic. Isel warns the group, saying if they lay a finger on her, they'd die instantly, claiming it as self-defense. Suddenly, a notification which seemed only visible to Isel appeared, to which she exclaimed, "The master has finally started." The remaining 10 people begin getting placed into parties at random. Isel yells at everyone to get ready as a large gate began to open, to which she referred to as crack of time and space. 5 people were picked and instructed to go through the gate or meet the same fate as Carl the mercenary. The farmer, Islat Han, tells her to wait a minute, which irritates Isel slightly, but she allows him to speak. He asserts that they are 1 stars and without weapons, concluding that sending them through the gate would be the same as suicide. He continues, adding that a precious 2-star hero just died, referring to Carl the mercenary. Noticing her blunder, Isel asks the master to provide the heroes with weapons, to which the master complies. The others begin to ask whether Han knew something about the place, to which he replies not much, since he hadn't been there long. He says what he does know is that they'll die if they don't do things properly. He then tells the party to get ready for battle. Although reluctant, they take up weapons. Now that they were armed, Isel ordered the first group of 5 to go inside the gate, to which they complied, not wanting to meet the same fate as Carl. Meanwhile, Han, who was part of the second group, was eyeing a wooden shield, while Jenna took up a longbow and quiver. Jenna, assuming Han knew what was going to happen, begins to launch a barrage of questions at him, asking why they needed weapons, where they were, and what was up with the fairy. Han says she has too many questions and tells her to just go in the arena, kill all the enemies, and that the rest would take care of itself. A notification suddenly popped up amidst their conversation, which Han appeared able to see, just like Isel, but no one else. The first party had been wiped out. Isel was visibly angry, screaming about the party being useless because they were annihilated on the first floor of the tower. The remaining people were called forward, which included Han and Jenna. It was their turn to enter through the gate. Han accepts the reality of the situation and readies to enter the gate, while Jenna wonders why the other people aren't coming out of the gate. An older man begins complaining about having arthritis despite being just fine. Isel, clearly angry, tells him to shut up and get ready. Jenna, seeing Han make his way towards the gate, grabbed the older man by the collar and dragged him along, following behind the rest of the party. Isel cheers on the 5 as they pass through the glowing gate and enter the other side. The group was transported to what seemed to be a temple. Then a notification suddenly popped up stating it was the first floor of the main dungeon. As the gates began to open, Han yells at the group to not freeze up, while a white light overtook them. The scenery changed into what looked like grassy plains, with a fiery sunset towards the horizon. The group looks around, and one of them asks where they were, to which Han responds the battlefield, while drawing out his sword. A group of level 3 goblins began to approach the party, wielding swords and wooden shields. Han reminds the group that they will die if they don't pull themselves together and fight. However, before he could finish his sentence, 3 of the party members threw away their weapons and began to run. Excluding Han, all 4 of the group members were stricken by fear, causing their stats to decrease by 30%. The 3 members who ran away appeared to hit an invisible wall and come to the end of the zone. As they scream and complain to be let out, Han calls them pathetic and resolves to fight alone. Jenna, who was the only other party member to remain with Han despite her fear, asked Han whether they would be able to leave if they killed the goblins. Han asks her if she is able to use a longbow, to which she responds that her father was a hunter. Han tells her to shoot arrows at the goblins while he charges in to fight them on the front lines. Jenna agrees and briefly looks towards the three who ran away. Han tells her to ignore them, concluding they won't be of any help. As the goblins rush the pair, it is revealed that Han has never wielded a sword nor a shield in his entire life. Although he calls himself Islat Han, his real name is revealed to be Han Seo Jin, a person who seemed to have been transported into a luck-based game. When the goblins attack, Han blocks the heavy attack and counters with his sword, while Jenna covers him with arrows from a distance. The other three party members remain in the back, stricken by fear and unable to do anything. Chapter 2. We are returned to the past. Pick Me Up, a mobile game made by a company called Mobius. The goal of the game was to get to the 100th floor of a giant tower by clearing each floor using strategies and materials to strengthen your heroes. The game had a hardcore rule that was once a hero died, it cannot be revived, no matter how much time you'd put into said hero. Whether it was a 7-star or a 1-star, once they died it was over. Because of this, Han sends heroes he doesn't care about for recon before commencing a real attack. Until yesterday, Han was living an ordinary life playing Pick Me Up. When he took part in a special event, he sent heroes he didn't care about in the tower to observe the boss's attack patterns to prepare for a real attack. However, upon entry, his entire party was stricken by fear, and before he could even react, they were wiped out by a level 999 shadow-like boss with the unreadable name, causing him to lose. Assuming it was a bug from a system error, he paid it no mind. As Han touched the screen of his phone, the game that was supposed to be over was still on, and the boss stared right at him saying,
"Found you."
As bewilderment overtook Han, everything turned black and he was unable to see anything. Soon a game-like notification popped up in front of him saying create account, then select name. He was unable to interact with the screen as it seemed someone else was in control, choosing anything as their name. A notification welcoming him to the world of Pick Me Up appeared, and when Han opened his eyes, he was in the body of a boy named Han Islat, standing with a sword in hand in the middle of a burning town in the Heim province called Taunia. As Han looks around trying to grasp his situation, multiple notifications pop up reading, an unknown enemy invades the peaceful land. You, master, if you wish to save the world, climb the tower. Many heroes will join you. With that, the tutorial quest begins and a goblin appears in front of Han. Han's first thought was that it was not realistic at all, but reality quickly set in as the goblin lunged forward, sword in hand, and jumped slashing downward at Han. Han reacts instinctively and blocks the attack, struggling for some time. His desperate battle against the goblin continued until he finally delivered the final blow, although he was still unable to follow the feeling of killing another organism in his head. After clearing the tutorial, Han left the town, wondering whether he was in a game, but still uncertain. Suddenly coming to a complete stop, Han's eyes widened in surprise at the familiar scene before him. It was a scene out of Pick Me Up, the game he'd played so often. A notification suddenly appeared asking whether the master will pull another comrade before the next stage. Golden light poured out of a door as Han asked what was happening. A super rare 4-star emerged from the light, a hero named Shay. Han began to wonder if he was summoned the same way by a Pick Me Up player before being interrupted by Shay, who asked whether he summoned him and who he was. Shay introduced herself to Han, saying she was a knight, and Han also gave his introductions. Immediately after that, the master called anything, placed the two in a party, and sent them to a dungeon. The difference in abilities between the two heroes was made obvious as they fought side by side. Having played the game Pick Me Up before, Han knew what was coming next, and it wasn't good for him. As the final tutorial stage arrived, it had Han shaken, as it was synthesis, a way to enhance heroes. Han was suddenly pulled out of his lament by a familiar voice. It was Isel telling him to get in the synthesis door as the master was waiting. Han stares at her blankly for a few seconds and said her name. Isel was surprised by this, since he shouldn't know her, and asks for his name. Han gives his real name and Isel pulls out a book to confirm it. Since Han didn't look like the Islat Han in her book, Isel asks whether he was from Earth, to which he says yes and asks to be sent back. Isel screams in confusion, and sure of what is happening, and tells him to just get in the synthesis machine. Han screams back, saying he'll die if he goes inside. Isel kicks him through their door and shuts it, where he finds Shay waiting, and the synthesis begins right away. Han watches in fear as blue flames begin to envelop his hands, unable to stop the process. Synthesis enhances a hero by combining them. It is a process in which one becomes a sacrifice for the other to consume and power up. Since Shay was a 4-star and Han was a 1-star, it was logical to conclude he would be sacrificed to strengthen Shay. A decision every player is most likely to make. Han acknowledges the situation and accepts his impending death, also believing no sane person would pick a 1-star over a 4-star hero. As the synthesis comes to its conclusion, Han opens his eyes in surprise, realizing he was the one that was strengthened in the end.
So this is it.
Shay utters those words with a slight smile on her face as her body begins to be enveloped by the blue flames. Han yells, asking why she was the one disappearing and that it made no sense because she was a 4-star and he was a 1-star. Shay responds with a sullen look, saying I wasn't chosen, that is all. Her lips curve into a smile as she looks towards Han and speaks once more, saying I'll leave it to you, Han. With those words, she disappears, leaving Han alone in the room. Han, stunned by the situation, simply stared in silence. Han says he doesn't know what is happening as the scene cuts back to the present, where one of the 3 party members who ran was being cut down by a goblin. He bled out immediately and returned to the goddess's arms. The goblins attacked not only Han and Jenna, but also the other party members, who threw their weapons and ran. As they continue to run, Jenna yells at them to fight as the monsters are coming, while Han tells her to not let her guard down or she'll die. Han charges forward and cuts his way through the goblins. He is unsure why he survived the synthesis with Shay, but he believed it was because he was lucky and the master made a stupid mistake. As a goblin cut off his right hand, Han did not falter, but pressed on, determined to survive. He was unsure why he was summoned into the game, but one thing he knew for certain was it had something to do with the level 999 shadow-like bugged monster. Asserting that it messed with the wrong person, Han continued to slash through the goblins, leaving only limbs and detached heads, until the battle came to its conclusion. Out of the 11 summoned, only Han and Jenna managed to survive. Jenna approached Han with concern as she looked at his missing limb, to which he said it'd be fine once they return. Han reveals that all the actions of the heroes in Pick Me Up were not controlled by players, but were automatic. Despite this, the game was popular, the reason being the players observed the world like a god. As Han stands from the blood-soaked grass to return with Jenna, his pick-me-up name is revealed to be Loki, the master of masters and the 5th place ranked in the entire game before he was summoned. He resolved himself to survive until the very end.